It's the Brad and John Show.
The Brad and John Show. It is the B block, the Bravo block. We started at about 6:20. We're a little bit late this morning. Today's date is Monday, May 19th. John, referencing what we talked about in the previous block, the A block for Monday, May 19th. And the reason I always give the date is because of the fact that a lot of people listen to us live, but a lot of people listen to us into the future on our podcast platforms. We talked about the situation with Kara Spencer's a little bit upset because we haven't gotten the designation for disaster area in the St. Louis area. And I said, why is that important? And you said it was partly because of funding. Was that what you said?
Yeah, maybe. And I think real quick, too, I don't think anybody expected the presidential administration to declare a disaster this weekend. But I think what Kara Spencer is saying is that she expected at least people from FEMA to be here on the ground helping direct efforts. You see what I'm saying?
Well, my point being, if I'm not mistaken, the city of St. Louis still has 9 figures of money in the bank. Isn't that still the case?
Yeah, you mean from the Ram settlement, right?
Well,
Brad?
not only that, they're still sitting on ARPA money. Don't they still have like millions of dollars or tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars?
Yeah,
ARPA
I think
money
you're
as well,
right.
too?
That's a fair point, Brad.
Okay. Why wouldn't you just say, you know, as the new mayor of City of St. Louis, I could just jump up and down and yell or scream the fact that we want our federal designation as disaster area so we can get some money. But you know what? We got money. I got a checkbook. I can write a check. We're going to start writing out checks right now to help these disaster victims, and then we'll try to get the money reimbursed by the federal government. Don't you think that would be like people go, oh, my God, this gal's great. She's wonderful.
I think it would be a better option. I would think, Brad, that, however, if I were a city resident, and I'm not, I don't want anybody from the city on Monday opening up their checkbooks for people who are claiming to have incurred a bunch of storm damage costs on Friday and Saturday. I think maybe we find a way. I'm sure there's a system set up that people could. You get what I'm saying, Brad? Like, I wouldn't want to write a check on Monday because Rufus R. Jones said that he spent $40,000 on equipment to clear trees out of his road on Cabiny on Saturday morning.
You know Rufus? I know Rufus.
I do know Rufus. Yeah. He's my main supplier for counterfeit Mad Dog.
Okay, John.
And he used to be my weed guy, but now all the dispensaries have popped up, and he's not. Like, there's no point in getting some swag for him on a Thursday night if I can just drive through the dispensary in Wildwood, you know?
Weed as in the stuff you smoke, or weed as in the stuff that Brad's trying to attack with vinegar and salt?
Yeah, I found some kind of a hippie concoction with acetic acid and Dawn dishwashing soap. My friend Brad doesn't actually want to spring for real Dawn, so I think he gets the Aldi version, but I think it still works, you know?
John, I have you note that I have, I not only do I have the real deal of Dawn, I've got the industrial strength Dawn that comes in a 1-gallon pump bottle. How about that?
Oh, wow. Now, Brad, before the storms on Friday, did you say you saw some actual weed-killing action?
No,
I thought you said that the vinegar you said that it had killed it, or were you just joking?
No. The vinegar thing was working, but the junk I bought, the Ortho Ground Clear, that stuff's worthless. I mean, and don't get me going on this. I mean, I've turned into Mr. Landscaper dude or stuff like that, but I will tell you something I did over the weekend. It's funny you bring this up. Now I will say this on the air. At one of my transmitter sites, I have areas around the towers that just grow up in these horrendous weeds. So I spent 20 minutes more than I should have at one of the local big box stores, and I won't say that which one, but it wasn't blue, it was orange. And Normally when I go to Orange Big Box, they have a great website that says, hey, what are you looking for? And you put it in, and they have a store map that comes up, and they tell you exactly what aisle and what bin and all that kind of stuff is at. I went to buy, because I'm trying to buy mass quantities of salt. And, if it were January, I could go anywhere and buy salt. You can't find salt anymore, like in a big bag. But I think to myself, okay, if you have a water softener, what do you use for your water softener? You use salt. So I found this on the website of the orange store, and it didn't give an aisle. And this is actually sort of one of these funny stories, is that after walking around the store for like 5 minutes, and because it didn't show an aisle, then talking to one Home Depot employee, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. I had a young Home Depot employee that I got my 10,000 steps in, following him around. And finally, we determined, and this is actually what's sort of funny, they moved all the softener salt to the front entrance of the store. And when I came in, I walked right by it. But the funny part of it was none of the people in the store knew where it was either. And one guy said, "Oh, it's out in garden." So we go in garden, not there. "Oh, it's back in housewares." Where appliances where they would have the water softener. Nope, not there. They stuck it right in the front, as you literally as you come in the door. There's like a couple pallets of it. So I bought 2 40-pound bags and I covered the area with salt.
Now, Brad, did you do any research? Like, is the salt content of that high enough to kill weeds, or did you just waste a bunch of time and effort?
99.8% pure sodium chloride.
Oh, wow. Okay, and I was going to ask, Brad, you might want to check your text too, because someone brilliant asked this question. I thought you were going in the direction of you were going to do a controlled burn.
No. The controlled burn, I think, are mutually exclusive terms sometimes. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you hear about these people that say, "Well, I was just burning some leaves in the back of my property, and I can't believe I started a 40-acre forest fire." No, I don't do that
Brad,
kind of stuff.
That doesn't sound like an East Coast or Washington University accent. What kind of accent was that, Brad?
That's crap. That's when I put on my Mayor of Crapville hat. I talk like that.
Ah, okay.
By the way, and I'm reading this. I'm going to read this. You are exactly right. Now this is a 2019 article.
Okay, what story are we going back to now?
What you sent me.
You want to let people know? Are we still at the Transmitter? Or are we going to Tulsi Gabbard?
This is the Tulsi Gabbard story. Representative Tulsi Gabbard, an Iraq War veteran who is running for the Democratic nomination for president, once again, this is 2019, recently revealed that she doesn't dye a gray streak in her hair because she wants it to serve as a remembrance of U.S. service members killed in the Iraq War. And her quote is, "No, I'm not going to fix that gray strand. I don't know what you mean by fix. If you mean dye, no, I'm not going to dye it. I actually started going gray in that one spot during and after my first deployment in Iraq. And so I keep it as a remembrance of those." Oh, now this makes sense. So I keep it as a remembrance of those who lost their and cost of war and why we fight so hard for peace. The Hawaii Democrat said in an Instagram live video posted over the weekend, apparently in response to a user commented on the gray streak. This is an article out of CNN, which John sent me, and this was published on September 4th of 2019. So the gray streak started way back when. Now, it's interesting. I see the picture over here, which is on the same article, and I don't see the gray streak there, but it's very prominent now. So anyway, who knows about that? Okay, lots of stuff to talk about. Something that is a national story that I'm always wrong when I say this. I don't think that John Combest has got this on the johncombest.com site today. And John will always say, "Well, I had it 2 months ago." That's the way it normally works with me when I articles. But are you aware of the interesting story, the national news story involving Grace Church in the St. Louis area?
No. Does it involve federal politics?
Yes.
Okay, then no, I haven't heard about it. What is it?
In 2022, the Biden administration came after Grace Church in St. Louis, and I believe they're talking about one of the mega churches, which I believe they have don't they have several locations? Isn't that the
Great? Okay, yeah. I thought when you said Grace Church, I'm picturing something like at Natural Bridge and Kings Highway. But is this a white church?
If I'm not mistaken, the big Grace Church is right there, and you're going to laugh when I tell you, in the village of Champ. Do you even know where the village of Champ is, John?
Of course I don't, Brad. Let's smarten us up about it.
Well, being a North County boy, you should know about the village of Champ because I guess technically it is in North County. The village of Champ is a small village on the southwestern corner of the I-70, I-270 interchange. And part of the village at Champ is the Fred Weber Quarry, and that church that sits up there, which is one of the big mega churches, if I'm not mistaken, that is Grace Church. I'll have to double check that. I have friends of mine used to go there, and I believe that's Grace Church. Okay, in 2022, as the story goes, the lead pastor of Grace Church, in one of his sermons, talked about some members of the church who were running for school board. And I don't know exactly what district that would have been in, but he essentially was giving out information, and supposedly they put some stuff on their website about support these parishioners for the church because they're good folks, and we need good God-fearing people as school board people, blah, 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 blah. And the Biden administration, the IRS came after them and said, you know what? That's not right. You can't do that. You can't stand in the pulpit and essentially promote politics. So therefore, we are going to take away your tax-exempt status. And what happened is the Trump administration, through the IRS, has dropped the case.
Well, that's fantastic news, right? I mean, one of your favorite topics is beating up on churches for not paying taxes. But on the other hand, doesn't it seem a little bit oppressive for the government to be doing this?
Well, you're saying in what?
So if the Biden administration was going to be yanking the church's nonprofit status, isn't that a little much?
I don't think the churches should have nonprofit status anyway. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I know that.
Okay. Here, I'll read you this. This is May 6th, and here's my source. I'll send this to you. And you may say this is a biased source. It's called firstliberty.org. And it says,
oh, yeah, boy, everybody knows that they do actual journalism. What is the real, like, who are they? Do you know? Did you invest any time, or are you just reading this and taking it at face value?
It's some church organization. But here, let me read you the story. IRS closes investigation of Missouri church that provided campaign information to church members. St. Louis, Missouri. First Liberty Institute and attorneys at Jones Day announced that the IRS closed its investigation of Grace Church in St. Louis, Missouri. The IRS's decision to close this investigation first opened in 2022 during the local school board elections, where the church researched candidate websites and reported that information to church members. Quote, pastors educate their members on a great many things. Educating members about the political position of candidates with information the candidates themselves provided should never result in an investigation by the IRS. This was Jeremy Diss, senior counsel for First Liberty Institute. We're pleased that the IRS not only closed this investigation, but affirmed that this church's activities do not threaten its tax-exempt status. Other churches should feel free to likewise if they so, blah, blah, blah. And then talked about the IRS's inquiry into Grace Church ran headlong onto the First Amendment, said John Gore, partner at Jones Day. We're grateful that this matter is closed and the IRS has recognized that this fundamental freedom applies to America's churches. So anyway, it says in 2022, during local school board elections, Grace Church posted information on the church website about positions local candidates held. 2 candidates were members of the church, and the church encourages members to support them for being willing to run for office. The IRS opened up an investigation during the Biden administration. Attorneys with First Liberty and Jones Day responded to the IRS investigation, asserting that the basis for its investigation was unconstitutional exercise in futility. Last week, now under the Trump administration, the IRS closed its investigation. So I know you think this is biased source. I'll send you the link.
No, it's not. I just went there, and it's a law firm website, Brad. That's awesome. I just pulled up the exact website, and it's a nonprofit conservative law firm group. It's not a news source. And you were reading from a press release, so that's not a news story. And I just did a comprehensive news search, and no legitimate news organizations picked this up, which explains why it wasn't on my website. And Brad, if Grace Church sounds familiar to people, back in November I looked. We discussed it because they hosted after the election what is called a night of encouragement. And they had Bill Eigel come speak at Grace Church, Brad, back in November, on November 14th, talking about where we stand as a nation, how to address Amendment 3, and how Christians can best work together to move forward in 2025.
Well, John,
so we have talked about Grace Church on the air before, Brad.
John, I wasn't going to talk about that, but you brought that up. But I went to hear Bill Eigel that night.
Oh, yeah? What happened?
I got thrown out. Matter of fact, there was some of the, I think it was like members of the State Highway Patrol, and who apparently are doing secondary duty with Bill Eigel because he's got bodyguard protection and stuff like that.
Uh-oh.
And the one guy recognized me, and he goes, "Hey, didn't we throw you out of one of his fundraisers several years back?" And I go, "Yeah, that was me. Hit the highway, dude." So I got back in my car and I left.
I didn't hear that story. But I heard that somewhere in that crowd, there was a listener to 97.1. So you got on the phone and you called Mike Elam and you said, "Hey, just want to let you know, somebody from 97.1 is here where Bill Eigel is. I think that's unfair. And I think I should snitch on this organization and have you call people that are in leadership at 97.1. Isn't that what happened, Brad?
No. But,
and then we pulled the string in your back and Chatty Cathy started calling Mike Elam and calling everybody, "Hey, did you hear? I think it's unfair. I'm going to stir trouble.
I don't start trouble, John. I just, now here's the interesting thing. what you just said before is emblematic of how screwed up our media is. Okay, this is a big story. I mean, a big story and it's a local story, but it's a national story because under the Biden administration, they came after a church because the church was trying to inform their parishioners of the school board candidates. Now, we all know that in most of the school board elections, we have extreme right and extreme left candidates. Would it be safe to say that, John?
I think that's fair. Yeah, you make that point very accurately about Francis Howell, Brad.
Right. You've either got the NEA people who are essentially saying we want all the kids to have, 3-colored hair and we want 5 different sets of bathrooms and blah, 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 blah. And then we've got the right-wing nutbags who go, oh, we don't want any books that talk about panty raids or anything like that back in the 60s at colleges and things like that. So, and I'm going like, okay, can we just get somebody in the middle? Can we just not have these extreme left-wing and right-wing people? Can't we have some people down the middle who essentially say, hey, we care about educating the kids. We care about them learning math and science and computer programming. That's what we care. We don't care about what books are in the library. We don't care about Johnny having 14 fathers or 32 mothers. We care about educating kids. But that doesn't seem to happen anymore. So here this church is trying to inform their parishioners, and they get dumped on by the IRS. And now the Trump administration says, hey, this sucks. IRS, close that investigation. Don't you think this is a huge local story and a national story?
I think if the issue was reversed, it would be a huge story, and every news outlet in St. Louis would be covering it and making heroes of the church if it was a progressive church. I'd also point out that there's 100% correlation between you talking about Tulsi Gabbard's long, beautiful hair and then moments later using the phrase panty raid. John. And I'm not saying that correlation equals causation, but I mean, you could probably figure it out yourself. Brad, have you ever Googled Tulsi Gabbard swimsuit? Because I just did, and it's phenomenal.
I've got all her pictures. No, let's go back that for a minute. Okay, John, you are probably too young to remember this, but back in the day, this was a big thing on college campuses. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I've heard of it before, Brad. Yeah.
Okay, the deal was, and you think I'm kidding about this, and this is something that happened back in the 50s and 60s, maybe even early in the 70s. Probably.
Maybe even circa 98 and 99. I don't know.
I don't think so. Okay, traditionally, the men on campus would perform a raid on, and was usually a sorority house or the women's dorm, where the men would rush into the women's dorm room or the women's sorority house and go through their drawers and bring back panties. And that was like, you think I'm making this up? I mean, this happened all the time. This was like
I completely believe it, Brad.
This was like one of the things that happened on college campuses all the time. I bet you any money. Here, I'm gonna do that next break. I'll Google panty raid, and it'll probably. I bet it happened down at Mizzou all the time. I bet it happened. I bet you know what? I bet it might even happen at Washington University. Although
I can't. There are things that you do as a fraternity pledge that you don't ever speak of, Brad.
Although I don't think, can I make a John Combest comment?
Please do.
I'm gonna essentially channel John Combest. Well, Brad, it doesn't happen today because none of the women at Washington University wear panties.
Oh, okay, Brad. I mean, most Gen Z do not wear anything under their yoga pants. I mean, if you peel them down, I don't know.
Okay, we need to take a break.